Welcome into the I-80 Boys College Football Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Christian Hunt, and that old fairy right over there is...
That would be Chris Vaca. Yeah, I am old, as we always state. Christian, how you doing, though, man? What have you been up to? It hasn't been that long since we talked. Did a podcast the other day. How you been, though?
Yeah, man, I think it's been a couple days. I've been pretty good. Just been doing some research into some college football, Chris. What about you, man? What have you been up to?
Been doing that, buddy. I'm excited to talk about the Vols today. We got a couple hot topics, too, guys, that I think will be pretty interesting as well. I am happy, though, Christian. It is the fucking weekend, though, bro. I'm pretty pumped up about that. I'm going to enjoy myself some Busch Lights and kick back and relax before this. This college football season's coming up right around the corner, Christian. Not that far away.
I know it's really not too far away. I mean, we've got to be not almost a little more than a month away from actually having some competitive games going on here. So that's pretty exciting.
Absolutely, man. I'm stoked though, dude. Like I say this every freaking week, though, man. I'm ready to go, man. Big things gonna be happening on this channel too, guys. 100%.
100%. We got some big things happening over there. Chris is getting close to retirement age, so he's going to be able to do a lot of different stuff. That old guy right over there.
Yeah, coffee at the coffee shop in the mornings, and then golfing all day, baby. That's what I'm gonna be.
Let's go. Well, Chris, let's get into our first segment here.
All right.
Ed Orgeron, Northwestern savior. There's some reports that have come out that Ed Orgeron was interested in the Northwestern opening. Now, since then, they've kind of backtracked, and I think they've come out and said he's not interested. Chris, what would be your thoughts, I guess, just on the whole situation?
Well, obviously, we talked last pod a little bit about this, about Pat Fitzgerald getting, canned over there. When I heard this, I just don't see Ed O being the guy for that job, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because Northwestern is just a very you got to be really smart to get on at that program, Christian. You know that. I would have definitely never made it there. We definitely know anybody from down south, including you, wouldn't have made it. Just with the intelligence level that you throw out every week on this podcast. But no, and maybe that, I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I see Northwestern probably. I think, what is it? Their defensive coordinator right now is currently their guy stepping in. I'm not even 100% sure. It's getting a little late in the season, too, Christian, to be able to try to get a head coach in there. I mean, got what? We said 5 weeks, 6 weeks here max before the start of the college football season. But I will say this, though. Edo, I love Edo. I know a lot of people don't like him. I thought he got ran out of LSU pretty quick, personally, just me. But Edo is he's a player's coach, man. I think there's a lot of jobs out there he could have. I believe he's still sitting at home getting paid by LSU, if I'm not mistaken. Off that 2019 championship, Christian. What's your thoughts, though, man? What do you got?
Yeah, they pretty much have David Braun, who is the assistant, not assistant, but he's the defensive coordinator who's stepping up there to coach.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would think that, Ed Orgeron, you can see in this article here by Sports Illustrated, he's since brushed off the rumors that he's interested in the job. Like, in a lot of ways, you would almost think that going to a place like Northwestern would be pretty good for him, right? I mean, expectations as far as success would be pretty low.
Oh.
Chances are they'd pay him something, it probably wouldn't be what they were paying him at LSU.
No.
But you'd get some money. It'd be a good foray back into college football, because if you can take over a program like Northwestern and you have a guy like Ed Orgeron, I have a good feeling that, Ed Orgeron, he would certainly get. He could probably be the one to turn around Northwestern, man.
I think so, because he relates to kids very well. You know what I mean? I think he's an awesome guy as far as a person. He did a damn good job at LSU. I know LSU probably doesn't think so. Some of that fan base, after the debacle that he had the year after the national title, but they also lost a bunch of people off that team too. I don't care who the hell was coaching that team that year after, but. Edo, I think we're going to hear his name. I think he will be a coach somewhere. In the near future here. I really do. I just don't know with Northwestern being that school. They did pay Pat Fitzgerald a shit ton of money. I will say that. I know he's going to court right now, or getting lawyers involved and everything, and trying to get paid out from my understanding, Christian.
No, I mean you're absolutely right. I mean there's a whole litigation thing kind of going on right there. They're trying to figure this thing out, and I think the school doesn't want to pay him, and then Pat Fitzgerald is like, no, forget that.
Right.
Fuck
Right.
that. You're going to pay me.
Right.
And I can't blame him. I mean, for sure, I definitely can't blame him for wanting to get paid. I think that from the Ed Orgeron standpoint of things, it on paper, I don't know if it necessarily seems all that likely, but again, you got to look at the last coach they had before Ed, and that was Les Miles. He ended up at Kansas State, so that didn't really feel like
Kansas.
a right.
Kansas.
Yeah. Or was it Kansas? Yeah.
It was Kansas, yep.
So he ended up at Kansas. That didn't really feel like that didn't feel like a good marriage either to me. So,
No.
I don't know. Maybe that's what Ed was looking at and just kind of seeing that in the back burner, and that's why he's only wanting a certain job to come open, or certain jobs, I would say, to come open.
No, I agree. And like I said, man, I think he will find himself in the head coaching seat somewhere. I do. Obviously Northwestern must not be the place for him. But like you said, one thing about Northwestern, the standard isn't going to be, off this planet as far as winning football games. You know what I mean? I mean, they won one game last year, Christian. I mean, it's the expectation bar is not set like it is at an Ohio State and Michigan and LSU. Some more of those prominent teams.
Nope, you're absolutely right, Chris.
All right,
we're talking about the SEC, former SEC coach. Speaking of the SEC, let's get into a little Tennessee Vols, man. We're going to take a look at the Tennessee Volunteers and what we think they can do this year. Chris, what are your thoughts on Tennessee?
All right, I'll break it down like I normally do, guys. Anybody that follows the show, follows the podcast, I like to break it down here from last year a little bit. Tennessee had I'm going to put it simple, a fucking amazing year for them last year. They did. They finished up 11-2, 6-2 in conference. I think they finished, 6th in the AP poll last year. Led the nation, Christian, in 46.1 points per game on offense. That was led by my boy, Hendon Hooker. If anybody knows, I was a big Hendon Hooker fan. I think that kid's a stud. I do think he'll be playing next year with the Lions, or the year after Jared Goff decides to hang the shoes up, honestly, because Hendon Hooker, man, I think he's a great quarterback. I do. Love the kid as a person. Anybody ever hear him talk? He's also about Stetson Bennett's age. But great dude, though. Back on track here, though. 36 in opponents' points per game last year with 22.8. Strength of schedule was, I believe, top 25 last year. They beat Clemson in the Orange Bowl, which was a big win. Clemson was no pushover last year, even though it was a down year for Clemson in their standards, 31-14. This is the first time, I think, since 2007 they won double-digit games in a season for Tennessee. So last year was awesome. Everybody looks back at that game against Alabama, right? I think probably 90% of the country was watching that game last year. That was crazy. I was super pumped, obviously, because I definitely don't like Nick Saban. So seeing Tennessee knock them off in that crazy high score, was it like 52-49, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Crazy game, man. Crazy high-scoring game, Christian. But I want to kick it over to you. You like to break down a little bit of the stats and players a little more in depth than I do on offense, man. I'll kick it to you here to enlighten the audience on how smart you think you are.
Well, thank you for that, by the way. I lived in Tennessee for, about 5 years, so I'm pretty familiar with the Volunteers. I've seen them play a couple times in person. Let me just try to do the program a little bit of justice here for you guys, right? I know you see all the Georgia stuff up behind me there, back-to-back champs. Let's get into it. Josh Heupel, dude, he's got them believing, man. You touched on it, Chris. 11-2. Only 2 losses last year were to Georgia and South Carolina. Had a huge win against Alabama, which is fantastic. It's something that the program's been wanting to do for north of a decade, it seems as if, is beat Bama, right? Here's the thing. They lose their offensive coordinator last year, Alex Galesh, to USF, right, the Bulls. But Heupel's got his right-hand man of 15 years in there, and Joey Hazel, who he's going to be stepping in, even though I think Heupel's used to calling plays. I mean, Heupel's an offensive guy. We know
yes,
that, right? He's called the plays. He handed it back to his, the former coordinator there, Golish, and then basically, I think that's something similar is going to happen. I think Heupel will probably start the year off calling plays, and then over time start to hand that off to Hazel a little more over time. Hand the offense to him. Here's the thing. You lose your offensive coordinator, you lose Hendon Hooker. But you get Joe Milton back. And Joe Milton, a few years ago, if you remember, he won the job over Hendon Hooker. But he struggled with accuracy. He could throw the ball a mile. That's never been the kid's issue. He can throw it a country mile. The accuracy was probably the biggest thing that I noticed with Joe Milton. Yeah, and so one of the big things there is, I got a feeling, though, he's going to dial it in a little more here, Chris. He's going to be a lot more dialed in this year.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. Joe Milton, I believe he was at Michigan, right, for some time before he came over to Tennessee. He was very highly recruited. He reminds me a lot of Anthony Richardson as far as the intangibles, the size, the speed. You know what I mean? Like, he's just he's a big kid, athletic as hell, a rocket for a freaking arm. Like I said, I think Joe Milton's going to be good. I just think what Hendon Hooker did last year was just ridiculous. I think that surprised some people around the country. My big question on offense is, though, you lose Jalen Hyatt, who was their big-time receiver, broke a ton of records there last year, and then Cedric Tillman, who came off that injury, played at the end of the year. He's in the NFL as well. Both those guys are studs. I know they got some guys replacing him, Christian, but, man, they lost some key pieces there on offense, Tennessee did. But I think Heupel is an offensive guru. He's a former quarterback at Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken. The guy knows his shit. I think he's going to be okay.
I'm going to finish up on Milton, and then I'm going to get right to that. Because you bring up a good point with the wide receivers here. Chris, look, Joe Milton, he had, in mop-up duty in a couple starts last year, he had 971 yards and 10 touchdowns to no interceptions. Okay. The biggest question mark is you lose a quarterback. Even at Georgia, they lose Stetson Bennett. Who's going to be the next guy up? Can Carson Beck manage this offense, right? We look at the same thing at Tennessee. Can Joe Milton run this offense and be the point guard that Hendon Hooker was? I think he can, right? Your biggest question marks, the wide receivers. You touched on it, Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt. But, dude, they bring back Brew McCoy, Ramel Keaton, and Squirrel White, right? Who are going to absolutely be able to step up and do that. Brew McCoy, big physical guy. He's going to be able to replicate what Cedric Tillman could do. Squirrel White is going to kind of be able to get in there and do exactly what Jalen Hyatt did as well. I mean, he's an elusive kind of guy. So you've got two guys that are kind of carbon copies of them who can step up. They produced last year. Both those guys I just mentioned, they produced. And then you got Ramel Keaton, who can kind of do similar things to both of them. He's a big, strong, fast kid that can make some things happen. So I don't think they're going to be, necessarily the wide receiver game. I don't think it's going to be off. They're going to still have some production there. I like that. They also bring back running backs. They're both running backs last year, Jalen Wright and Jabari Small. They combined. You ready for the stat line, Chris? They combined for 1,700 yards and 25 touchdowns last year.
Impressive. Very impressive.
The offensive line should be pretty good this year, too. They did lose some tackles and some different pieces of that offensive line over the year, but I think they're going to be okay. Again, Tennessee on offense, not all that worried. Defensively, Chris, what are your thoughts on it?
This is where I think they need to improve. I know they've lost some pieces. You'll get into the players here as you always do. I think they were ranked 127th in the nation last year in pass defense, Christian. It was bad. I mean, we saw the Bama game. I know it's Bryce Young on the other side of the ball. I get all that, but the South Carolina game where Spencer Rattler just fucking torched him. And no, don't get me wrong. He played the game of his life. That was the one good game I think of, maybe 1 out of 3 I've ever seen him actually play well and not cost them a game at South Carolina. But they got destroyed that game. I think that surprised a lot of people. Not that necessarily that South Carolina won that game, but just the score when you look at it from an outside view. But the defense has got to improve, man. If they want to compete for an SEC title this year, the SEC is going to be good. We know that. We don't have to get into how good the SEC is week in and week out, but. It's going to be tough, and I'm going to let you I'm going to kick it right over to you. You always got the most knowledge on the players, who's coming back, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think, defensively last year, they weren't, if you look at the season as a whole, they really weren't terrible. But there was, like you said, there was a couple of games last year where they got lit alive, especially in the passing game, right? And I think this year they're going to be much better. Right, Tim Banks, I think he's in his 3rd year there with them. I think they're going to be fine. They recruit that side of the ball pretty well. They're probably going to make some schematic changes. They're going to work some things in. They get some kids back that have experience. To me, I think they'll be okay there. The other good news and the best part of this is they get the heart and soul of the defense back from last year, and linebacker Aaron Beasley, he's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
They also have a very uberly talented freshman linebacker, and I've heard a lot of things about this here, right? Arian Carter is his name. Keep an eye on him. I hear he's going to be doing some good things at Tennessee, right? And a lot of Tennessee fans are excited about what he can bring to the table this year. You know, Chris, the other thing is they get back just about all their defensive line from last year. Now, here's
That's
the
huge.
other side of this. This is the other side of this, and this is where I think some of these stats and stuff like that, you kind of have to dig in a little more. They combined their entire defensive line last year combined for 8 sacks. So, you look around the country and guys that are getting drafted have, I think Will Anderson Jr. at some point had more than double that at a certain point. So,
Right.
you've got to be able to get to the quarterback and kind of affect his accuracy to be able to help that secondary out.
Well, that's why they finished so poorly, I think, and that's where I was getting to on the secondary, right? Where you finished in the bottom 10 of the country in pass defense. Well, a lot of that, usually most relatively smart people go, where was your pass rush, right? You know, like if you're not putting any pressure on the quarterback, Christian, your DBs can't cover forever. I don't care if it's Sauce Gardner back there, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, you're exactly right. You touched on it. I mean, they ranked 127th last year in passing yards allowed. The secondary this year, they're going to need Jamarian McDonald and Kamal Haddon to step up big time and lead them. I'll kind of touch on this really quickly as we're moving through it. I think his name is McCullough. You know, they're starting safety slotted. He's still on the roster right now. There's some stuff kind of going on where there's an alleged assault charge kind of going on.
Okay.
They're going to have to get that part figured out. And if they can get that kid back, that'd be a pretty big grab for him. But outside of that, Chris, I do think on the outside looking in, you know, a lot of non-Tennessee fans would be quick to say, look, they're not scared of Tennessee defensively. But I think this year they're going to figure some things out. They're pissed off. Heupel's had to hear it for the last couple of years. He's not a defensive-minded guy. I think the thing that's keeping them from really taking that next step and being on that same level as a Georgia or an Alabama is the defense, right? I mean, not just because Kirby and Nick Saban are defensive gurus, but I think it's more or less, you know, their offenses are always typically good enough to be able to keep them in just about every game they play. I think you have to do the same thing if you're Tennessee on defense, and you have to be more than, you know, I'm not saying you got to be elite. You don't have to be the next Georgia, but you got to at least be able to hold teams to, you know, 24, 25 points a game.
Right, and I think that's the big thing too. Is like, I guess my question is part of that. I also have a little bit of question Joe Milton stepping in. I'm not saying the kid ain't talented, and I think that Heupel runs kind of more of a plug and play style system. That's what it looks like to me, where it is kind of like a Lincoln Riley, right, or a Ryan Day offense, where it just seems like every 3 years they put a new quarterback there and he's putting up these crazy numbers, and it really doesn't matter who it is. And don't get me wrong, those quarterbacks, Caleb Williams and C.J. Stroud, are all studs, but obviously, yeah, the defense, I think if they can they don't have to be elite. They don't have to be a top 20 defense to be able to compete in the SEC. It's just in those tight games, Christian, where maybe the offense isn't moving the ball as well as they normally do, right? Can your defense bend but not break, keep you in some games? Instead of giving up touchdowns inside the red zone, you give up a field goal, right? That's crucial in the SEC. We watch a lot of SEC football here. You see it all the time. You can't be giving up 49 to Bama. You know what I mean? Thank God their offense outscored them, but I mean, that's a track meet, man. That's over 100 points scored in a game by two teams. That's crazy. You don't see that all the time, even in college football.
No, you definitely don't. Tennessee fans, down below, be sure to comment what you think about your Volunteers this year as we get ready. I think, Chris, we're going to jump in now to a little bit of the record predictions here for Tennessee. Chris, let me get the schedule pulled up here.
There we go.
Just a tad bit.
Okay.
All right, there we go. Chris,
all right. Sorry,
I'll let you give your thoughts. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're fine, man. I'm ready to jump into this because I already have a feeling that you're going to be really, really, really high. And I feel like I'm going to probably piss some Tennessee people off, and that's okay. Here's my thing with Tennessee this year. And like I said, I broke down the offense. We broke down the defense. I got the win at Virginia. I'm not worried about that. Austin P, whatever you want to call him. Here's the big one here. And everybody knows I just take a lot of shit from the Florida Gators. I think Tennessee fucking destroys them, personally. Chalk that up as a W, Christian. That UTSA game, they're actually supposed to be pretty good this year. They really are. I mean, for a team that's over there. I think what do they call that? The AAC or whatever the hell they're in with Tulane, that conference. But no, Tennessee destroyed. Not worried about that. So we're starting off 4-0. That's great. We get into that South Carolina game. Christian, me and you have some thoughts on South Carolina. I think that will obviously going to be a rematch last year. Spencer Rattler's back. South Carolina's gotten some offseason hype this year. I have Tennessee beating them. I don't think South Carolina can do it 2 years in a row personally. Move on to A&M. A&M, big game, but Tennessee has both South Carolina and A&M at home. I think that's huge for the Vols. Bama. I have the one loss there. I also think they struggle and lose to Kentucky. I know that surprises you, but this is the way I've went over this a couple different times, this breakdown. I think they lose to Kentucky. They slip up there. I truly do. UConn, Jesus, I didn't even know they still had a football team. Moving on to Missouri. I'm not worried about the Tigers over there. Georgia. I think it's going to be a good game. I think Georgia gets the nod, though. They're going to beat Vanderbilt. I have them at 9-3, Christian. And I know a lot of people, a lot of polls have Tennessee right now between 9 and 15. I did a lot of research on this. I obviously I do my own rankings. I don't base mine off of Christian's or somebody else or anybody at ESPN or any of those big major websites. But I see a 9-3 year, Christian. I don't think that's a bad year. I have a few questions about Joe Milton. I have a few questions about the receivers replacing Hyatt and Tillman this year. And can the defense improve? I think they can. If those things do happen, they definitely got a chance to maybe go 10-2, maybe surprise Alabama. I hope they beat them again. That would be fucking awesome for me. But Christian, I want to hear your thoughts since you gave me those couple minutes there to break that down, buddy.
Yeah, not a problem. Like I said, first of all, you're wrong. I think that they're going to be.
Surprise me.
Yeah, no,
I
think
surprise me.
I'll go ahead and just jump right into it. I'm not going to jump around here. I think 11-1. That's where I got them at.
Holy shit! What's your one loss? Is it the Bama Georgia? Is that what you're splitting it?
Nope. This is probably going to be what's going to surprise you. South Carolina.
Wow, man, you are riding the Gamecocks hard this year, damn, dude.
Well, listen, 11-1. Your only loss is to South Carolina. Just because I think that you got to look at it from this standpoint. Does Texas A&M with as much as they've lost in the portal this year, do they scare me? No. Does Alabama does any quarterback on their roster scare me? No.
Fuck no.
Georgia. We just touched on this before we got on the.
This surprises me.
Yeah, we just touched on this a little bit before we got on here. In the second half of that national championship game, a lot of the Georgia players were out there on the sidelines eating chicken wings and fucking off. This could be a year where there's a lot of pieces that are coming back, but a lot more pieces that have gone on, right, to the NFL or graduated, whatever have you. Georgia might be in for a weird slump year, right, where they could have a couple losses this year. I think Tennessee's one of those teams that can absolutely, figure it out. And the reason why I say South Carolina, right, if anybody you're looking at, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't jump out. I like what South Carolina's doing. They've got Spencer Rattler. They got Shane Beamer over there. I think that they're going to probably be in for a sneakily good year this year. They can pull off a couple of upsets this year. I like I said, I think Tennessee might be one of those games, especially last year. You saw how they played late in the season against.
It was ugly.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a very close game. So I know Tennessee's going to be fired up and ready to go, but at the same time, I think that they have a loss. If it's not to South Carolina, pick any one of these schools. I think for me, they're going to have another 11-1 season this year.
Okay, I got a problem with this. Your whole fucking take here, actually. So I got one question first to start off and ask you. You're a Georgia Bulldogs fan, right?
Yes, sir.
Are you you a diehard truther? Do you walk around every day letting everybody know that you're back-to-back national champs?
I do.
Okay. If Tennessee beats Georgia, I want to make a bet with you right here. If Tennessee beats Georgia, I want you to take that shit down behind you, and you got to hang up something with the Vols. I can't believe, Christian. I know you're a realist, and I know that the likelihood of Georgia three-peating is super, super low. I get that. I just can't believe, man, that you got South Carolina being the team that beats them out of all these teams. Alabama, South Carolina, or I'm sorry, not South Carolina, but even Florida's on that list, who we don't think very highly of. Connecticut. You might think UConn's going to come in there and beat them, Christian. Is that a chance? I mean, where you're taking this is just like, I'm serious. Like, the one loss you pick out of this whole schedule with A&M in there, Bama, Kentucky, obviously, Missouri, Georgia. You think they slip up against South Carolina again?
Yeah, I do. Let me explain why,
man,
Chris. It's college. Listen, it's college football. Last year we saw the same shit with TCU, right? TCU. Now, granted, we're talking two completely different teams here, but we see it all the time in college football. Last year, TCU lost to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship. Then they turn around and beat what everybody thought was going to be a landslide against Michigan, right? They turn around and beat Michigan and pretty much handled that game, right? You just never know in college football. Right? You're asking, could they lose to UConn? Yeah. I mean, shit. It's college football, right? I'm not saying they're going to. I'm just saying you're trying to get my goat here. I know what you're trying to do. I could throw it back on you and just say, hey, listen, motherfucker, 2022 is a lot sooner and a lot closer to where we're at now than 1995.
Hey, look, no. I ain't bringing up 1995, man. That's just so I can bag on all those Florida people because all they do is talk shit to me. Here's the other thing, though. Okay, then I'll ask you this. No, all bullshit aside. Does Tennessee, in your end of the year rankings, win the SEC or at least in the title game? Then I'm assuming 11-1.
I would say it'd have to be. It would have to be.
So you got them in the playoffs?
It would just depend on it would depend on who they go up against. You know what I mean? Really and truly. In that game, I'm not saying they're going to win the SEC. I mean, theoretically, if they get that far, I would hope they would.
Right.
I mean, like I said, if you're 11-1, I would almost expect them to be in the playoffs. So
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a bold take, and I don't want to hate on any Tennessee people here. I'm not. I think their season last year was amazing. I mean, with coming in with Joe Milton, and I'm not hating on Joe Milton, but losing those two stud wide receivers and the defense giving up that kind of passing yards next year, I know this is a different year, and I understand that. I've been around college football for 30 years. I get it, but like, damn, man, and Christian, I hope you're right. I don't mind the Volunteers at all. It's just, damn, I love it, man. I hope you put some money down this year on the Volunteers. Holy shit, man, that's impressive. 11-1. I was. Like I said, me and Christian, by the way, guys, we do not talk about this before we do the pod. So this is all new news to me. So I love it when we have arguments like this. I think it's great. I say 9-3. I still think that's a fucking awesome year for Tennessee this year. Christian says I'm full of shit. Next thing you know, in a week or two from now, they're running the table, winning a national title. So,
well, but you got to think about it too. You know, Chris, you don't go from making $100,000 a year to $60,000, and you're excited about it. You know, so you can't go from winning 10, 11 games a year to winning 6, or to winning 9 and be cool about it.
Well, I agree. I thought maybe last year was a little bit of an outlier year with Tennessee, just from the previous, history they've had, because they've been pretty bad before that. I mean, they've had some decent teams in there, but they haven't won a title since 98 or whatever the hell it was with Peyton Manning. Or not, no, it wasn't Peyton Manning, it was T. Martin.
T. Martin.
Yeah, so I mean, they got their ass beat by Bama, I swear, 14 out of the last 15 years. So I do think Josh Heupel's a damn good coach. I think he's a great offensive mind, obviously. He showed that last year. A few questions on the quarterback, if Joe Milton can play. That's where I'm really at with that, and the wide receivers, dude. Otherwise, if their offense puts up they had a number one fucking scoring offense last year. They do that again. Tennessee will be looking at a 10-2, 11-1 type of season. You might have one slip up there. It's hard to run the table, as you know, Christian. And, of course, you guys have done that, so I'm preaching to the wrong guy here.
Have we? I hadn't really been paying attention.
I know. I hate that you've won 2 back-to-back times. It really makes this podcast hard for me. It really does. Because I can't, say anything because, George has just been fucking unreal. And just imagine that's your team and the state you're from. So if I had the Iowa man on here, I could easily, get my way. But here I am. So it's good for me, though. Anyway, Christian, I like your take, though. I like it. It was good. It was a good take.
Chris, you brought up something interesting there at the end, the Iowa man. speaking of the Iowa man, let's get into a little Hunt's hot seat here.
Yeah, right.
This week on the hot seat is old Kirk Ferentz. Chris, what do you think about that?
I tell you what, it's kind of funny here being in Nebraska, and I got one of my best friends is a huge Hawkeyes fan, right? And I had to rub it in last year with Nebraska beating them, knocking them out of the Big Ten title game. That was actually our bowl game. I know I'm a Nebraska fan. I apologize. It's been rough. But Kirk Ferentz entering his, 25th year, Christian? This fucking guy's been here forever, man. I mean, he's been there back when I was in college, which I know was a lifetime ago, right, Christian? Big thing is, though, unless they shit the bed to me, dude, I mean, we all know how bad Iowa's offense was last year. It's been very well documented, and I've watched plenty of Iowa games in my lifetime. Last year's was, I don't even know if there's a word for it, how bad Petrus was last year. I mean, it was terrible. We could have brought you out of retirement, Christian, and you would have been more successful, and that says a lot. Here's my other thing. Ferentz is 186 and 115 in lifetime at Iowa. He's way up there. The guy's been coaching for a long time. I think he's a good coach. I do. He's done a lot for the program. You think Iowa football in my lifetime, I'm 38, you think Kirk Ferentz. That's pretty much what you think. I don't see them having a bad year this year overall. I really don't. I think they probably go 8-4, 7-5 at worst. If they have like a 5-7 season, Christian, to me, that might be it. I could also see him being kind of forced out of there if something like that happens instead of a firing. He's got his son around. I know the whole deal here. I think it would take a lot for Iowa to suck that bad because their defense is always really, really, really good. They play a lot of sound football most of the time, but they got Cade McNamara coming in for over Michigan. He is going to be an upgrade no matter how he plays over Petrus last year. I mean, that was one of their biggest problems, dude. It was so they couldn't convert a 3rd and 3, dude. I mean, or 3rd and 1. It was just weird last year. Anything where they had to throw the ball, it was horrible. I mean, they even played Ohio State super tough last year, and Ohio State was leaps and bounds better than they were. Defense kept them in that game. So I'm not worried about Kirk Ferentz overall. Christian, I want to hear your thoughts here. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I think it's a lukewarm take here on this, right? I mean, this is something we kind of put together ourselves, but I think it's, people in Iowa, they love Kirk Ferentz.
Oh, yeah.
But they also want to win on the national stage really, really bad. And I just think you can't keep being an 8, 9, 10 win coach every single season and expect to be around forever. Understandably, he's had a couple of really good seasons. He's had a couple of 11-win seasons. He's had, I think, a year where he won 12 games. I mean, it's been really close at times, but a couple of years ago, hell, they were competing for a Big Ten championship, if I'm not mistaken. So it's one of those tough things, I feel like, if you're an Iowa fan, where it's like, it's been kind of up and down, up and down. Always good enough to be a bride, bridesmaid, never good enough to be a bride, man.
Do I got a question for you. Do you think part of the problem with Kirk Ferentz, is that he's from that old school brand where he maybe hasn't caught up with the game? You know what I mean? He's been coaching for 25 years just as a head coach at Iowa. He's been around the game for fucking ever. Do you think that's maybe part of the problem? Because they don't adopt it is the Big Ten. You got to be able to run the ball in the Big Ten. Anybody that watches football knows that. But do you think it's because they are very, very simple? And I know simple works in football, but today's era where you got to be able to do a little play action, you got to be able to do, some teams run out of the spread. Ohio State's really good at it. Even Nebraska shows that once in a while. You look at Michigan, even they do it. They'll run with the quarterback. You know what I mean? Do you think that's maybe part of the problem that he doesn't want? A lot of those guys are stubborn, right? They've been doing it for so long. It's my way or the highway type of thing. Do you think maybe that's part of the problem?
I think so too, but I mean, you look at any line of work, especially in college football, whether you're Georgia, whether you're Alabama, Nick Saban's probably the greatest example of this. He kind of ran this style of football for the longest time where he was going to beat you up on defense. They were going to kind of pound the ball down your throat for 3 quarters and then start trying to, absolutely tear you up, with a tight end and the passing game and the play action game and do everything like that. And that's fine. Nick Saban can absolutely do that. He has 4- and 5-star guys that were drafted in the NFL long before this new age of football was there, right? He goes all the way back to Julio Jones, right? And some of those guys.
Oh, God, yeah.
The problem is, and this is the problem, Saban realized at a certain point, hey, we've got, and you touched on it a couple of podcasts ago.
Yes, I did.
In that LSU game, you've got to be able to adapt. You cannot keep going in these games where you just try to play, not I don't say scared, but you try to play clock management and you try to win by a field goal. You have to be able to spread the ball around and not be afraid to kind of move it and get away a little bit from running the ball. Now, they still run the ball, but they're not afraid to pass it. And I think that a big part of it too, Chris, is, he's put himself in a really tough situation, Kirk Ferentz he has, because his son is his offensive coordinator.
Right.
So if they don't do well this year and the offense doesn't improve drastically, and they're one of the worst offenses again, or in the bottom third of offense again this year, even with McNamara coming in, I would almost make the argument that he's going to be put in a situation where the administration is going to come to him and say, "Hey, you have to fire somebody on that offensive side of the ball."
Right.
Which I don't think he's going to do. I don't think there's any way Kirk Ferentz will ever fire his son.
See, and I'm going to touch on this real quickly. I don't like father-son things. I just don't. And this is kind of a reason why. And I'm not saying that Kirk Ferentz is a bad coach, and I'm not saying his son is. It's more, you know what I mean? When it doesn't work, it doesn't seem to work. You know what I mean? It's the first thing people want to point to, especially Iowa, because Iowa is one of these programs, man. And trust me, they're, I guess, our rivals, since we moved over to the Big Ten with the Nebraska fan here. But it's like, they're a damn good football team. I'm not going to sit here and knock them for that. And they do play an old school style of football. But you got to be able to adapt, and that's kind of why I was asking that question, Christian, because you see what Saban did, who I don't like Nick Saban, but what he did to me, had all those average to below average quarterbacks pound the ball with Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram. He realized, holy shit, college football's evolving into the spread. I got to build. Then all of a sudden, he's got Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa on his fucking team, and all these 4-star, 5-star receivers that all play in the NFL now, right? I give him a lot of credit for doing that, because Nick Saban is a control freak. He is a guy that does it by the book in his way or the only way, right, type of thing. I'm wondering if Kirk, not saying he's got to go that drastic, but it's like, look, man, like you said, he has put himself in a tight spot here with his son being the offensive coordinator. They got to get it going this year on offense. They do. I watched a lot of Iowa last year, especially the last couple of years. It's like, it's got to get it done. And I actually have Iowa, I think, going 8-4 in my predictions. I think he's fine there. And Iowa could definitely do better in that, too. They got a lot of pieces. Iowa's known for offensive linemen and great tight ends and pounding the football. Their defense is always fucking elite. It is. Their defense is, especially in the Big Ten, man, it's tough to beat Iowa. They win a lot of ugly games. The only problem is when they get down by 10 or 14, though, what do you do, right? That's the problem. Now you got to throw the ball.
Yeah, then you got to get those linemen to block, that pass protection.
Yep.
And there's so much about it, I feel like, where it's, they have, that's the weird part of it. They have good offensive linemen that have come out, like Tristan Wirfs, the first one that comes to my mind.
Yep.
For the Bucks, and it's like, they have linemen that can pass protect really well, that go into the next level. But I think right now where they're at, they're more of a kind of run the ball down your throat, kind of like how Nebraska was last year. Their pass protection over the last couple of years wasn't all that great.
That was horrible.
So you have to figure out a way to kind of, get all of this stuff to mesh up and be able to get a quarterback that can do the little things right. That's such a big thing. I look at this and I think a lot of people think he's untouchable.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, a lot of people look at him like he's untouchable, but I think that a good chunk of people, right, they want a bit more out of this program, right? So they want a bit more. They want a taste of that college football playoff. They want that. They know it's right around the corner. Hell, we can win 8, 9, 10 games a year. Why can we not get over the hump and beat the Michigans or the Ohio States and cement ourselves into the playoff?
So,
and for
go ahead. Sorry. No. Finish up.
I was just going to say, I think that, I'm looking at Ferentz right now, like I looked at Mark Rich, towards the end of his tenure with the Bulldogs, right? He's always good enough to get you to the, he's always good enough to get you to the doorstep of the dance, but he can't ever get you in. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's going to cost him, right? I mean, it took UGA hiring Kirby Smart and getting a lot more aggressive on the recruiting trail while also having that dog mentality. You go back and you look at Mark Richt interviews versus Kirby Smart interviews, you can just tell Kirby's got a little bit of nastiness to him. Right?
Oh, yeah.
You can go look at Kirby's practices, right? Kirby's not afraid to get in your ass. I mean, he does not care. But you got to have that dog mentality to get them over the mountain. And I think Iowa, it might just have to do that same thing in order for them to kind of be, running the Big Ten again.
No, I'm with you. So my question, to end this real quick, what's it take for him to get fired this year and or let out the door? What type of record? Bowl game, like a 6-6? Is that enough or no bowl game?
I would say a 6-6 season would probably be cause for concern.
Okay.
Right? Obviously, if he can make it to a bowl game, I think that they would be the talks about his hot seat would start heating up a lot more. I think that a 5-win season, you fail to make a bowl game, I think that administration would have to step in and say, hey, especially it depends on how they get there, right? If the defense shits the bed and the offense looks really good,
right,
that's a little different. But if the offense continues to struggle and they can't sort of formulate an identity this year like they were last year, I would have to think that the administration comes in and says, hey, we need you to get rid of your son. Yeah, we need you to get rid of your son and try to get this thing going. And if he's not willing to do that, I think they would say, okay, well, we're going to have to ask him to step down.
Right. No, I agree. Okay, that was my question to wrap that up on the old Iowa Hawkeyes.
Well, pretty good there, Chris. One of our last segments here, your favorite segment here, our hot take. Let's look at it. Let's get it in here. Hot take. Ohio State finishes third or worse in the Big Ten East this year, Chris.
So
what are you thinking?
I'm fucking torn on this. I thought about this a lot. Not even that we were having this hot take. It was just in my post or preseason rankings here where I think teams finish. I got another month yet, but I was really looking at this crazy division, which we call the Big Ten in a weird way because it's so heavy on the one side, right? You got Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. And I think right now I have Ohio State beating Penn State. I don't think Ohio State beats Michigan this year. I don't. I know that may seem crazy, but I don't. I think Michigan's the best team in the Big Ten this year. And I don't want to say it's not even close, but I truly do. Michigan brings back a lot of pieces. J.J. McCarthy, if he does what he did last year was enough to get by Ohio State, and Ohio State doesn't have C.J. Stroud now, he's definitely going to be better this year, I think. And that's where I'm just like, Ohio State, they lost some guys in the NFL draft on the offensive line. We could say that about every team. I know that, but they do have Marvin Harrison Jr. coming back, which is, that guy's a stud. I don't have to talk about him much. But I think Ohio State, and maybe I'm going to piss some Ohio State people off here when I say this, Ohio State to me is soft. They've been soft for quite a while now. It's been a while. Especially on the defensive side of the ball at times. And I know everybody in the comment section is going to tell me, oh, did you watch the fucking playoff game against Georgia? We were a field goal away. Well, Georgia also missed 2 field goals in that game, too, if you didn't mistaken. C.J. Stroud played the best game that I had ever seen him play, Christian, in that was amazing what he was doing in that game. It was. Against a crazy good Georgia defensive team.
You're exactly right. I mean, listen, I'll say this, dude. As a Georgia fan, I was really impressed with what Ohio State was able to do. I mean, you guys ultimately should have won that game, right? So that's kind of why I feel like I have to stick up for you guys in this, right?
Right.
I know a lot of people are kind of pissed off about the Javon Bullard crunch punch, on Marvin Harrison. I don't think it. Again, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of controversy with that. Depends on what side of it you're on. Again, I digress. But looking at it from this standpoint, you're absolutely right, dude. C.J. Stroud is gone.
Yeah.
And this puts Ohio State / Ryan Day, right? Ryan Day in newfound territory. He's got a true quarterback controversy on his hands. I mean, ever since he's taken over, he's had Fields, then he transfers to Stroud. Now they've got to figure out, this is the first time he's legitimately had to make a decision on a quarterback since he's been there. So, for me, it's between Devin Brown and Kyle McCord, which I think McCord's kind of got the inside track for it. Maybe both these guys are probably going to play this year. kind of reminds me a little bit of Michigan. Not that long ago, right? When Michigan had that whole controversy with their quarterbacks with McNamara and McCarthy.
Yeah, I will add to this too, and I haven't finished up here, and I wanted just to hear your kind of thoughts on Ohio State last year. Sure. You're right, C.J. Stroud, that guy was a stud, and we know that Ohio State, like Christian just said, it's like plug and play there. But under Ryan Day, this is new. This is a new territory, like you said. I'm torn between this Penn State and Ohio State game. I think Penn State is going to be better with Drew Aller this year. I truly do, and I could go through the list of reasons why. The only thing is the quarterback play is going to come down to me this year, as we just talked about for Ohio State. Their defense, I think, needs to get more physical. Personally, I know they play in the Big Ten, but Ryan Day I know he's a damn good offensive mind. I know he's a damn good coach, and he's a damn good recruiter. That's proven. That's facts. I get that. I'm torn yet because I think Penn State, this might be it for James Franklin. I think he almost has to get it done after 10 years there, Christian. He hasn't won the Big Ten since 2016. I think the Ohio State game is the most likely win he could have out of these two. Crazy stat for you, by the way. Penn State has only beaten Michigan and Ohio State in the same season twice. They've had that same schedule, both of them in there 26 times. So it's about 7.5%, 8% chance of doing so. But I'm big on Penn State this year, and we'll talk more about them, I think, as the season is coming up here. But I really truly think Ohio State. This is kind of like I don't want to say panic territory. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to piss anybody off from Ohio State, nor do I really give a shit. But here I am. I actually think Penn State can do this, man. And like I said before, I come out with my preseason rankings, which don't mean shit. I actually more leaning towards Penn State pulling this off. And it's not necessarily Michigan. There could be some slip-ups, Christian, but I actually think there's a chance this year because Michigan's got a lot of people coming back, quarterback included. Penn State, I know, does have a different quarterback there, but he has played some too as well. I just don't see how this Ohio State team is like locked and loaded for a playoff run this year. I just don't. I don't see it. I think they're going to be obviously a top 10 program this year, but I just, with the Big Ten and that side, man, I just don't see it happening. I really don't, the more and more I think about it.
Wow. I think that you bring up a lot of good points, and on paper I think they make sense, but let's get into it, motherfucker. Because I'm ready to defend some butt nuts right now, man. I'm ready to go.
God, here we go. Jesus.
Look, man, they need to get a lot of stuff figured out pretty quickly on in the season, right? I mean, Michigan is going to be really good this year. They got a ton of pieces coming back. They have arguably one of the best running back rooms in the country. Penn State, and you touched on them, right? They have a great group of running backs, and they have an uber talented young quarterback in Drew Aller. He's a 5-star player. He was a top 5 pick, or a top 5 player in the country coming out of high school. Here's the thing, though. Defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, right? He's going to be in the second year here. He's going to have him playing better this year, man. Especially in big games. I got a feeling they're tired of this narrative kind of going on, right? I want to scroll down here, and I'm just going to look at the defensive side of the ball for just a second. Okay, let's look at the front seven here, dude. This guy right here balled out last year. Old JT, Ty Hamilton, I think he's going to be good. Michael Hall, he balled out last year. Then we get into the linebackers. This, to me, is one of the best parts of this team. Jack Sawyer, Tommy Eichenberg, Still Chambers, right? Then we get into the back half of it. Josh Proctor, Denzel Burke, Cameron Martinez. Like, these guys played pretty good last year, right? I mean, they did. It's going to be interesting to me. Like I said, I think defensively they're going to be much better this year. Here's the other side of it too, right? I wanted to start off with that so then we can get into the more sexy side of this here. Ohio State has one of the best running back rooms in the country. I know I just said Michigan does, but
Penn State's up there.
And Penn State does too, but Ohio State is up there as well, right? You got to look at Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson.
Henderson's a stud. I agree.
They've got some guys. I mean, you could argue like they were a 3-headed monster last year, dude. It doesn't matter. They're going to keep churning and burning. Then you go back and you look at, by the way, who they have coming back at the wide receiver position.
Oh, yeah.
Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming. So I
Fleming.
remember this kid's he was a very highly recruited guy.
He's only tore his
Emeka
ACL like 6 times, but yeah, he's a fucking stud. So is Abekwa, or however you say his name. He's a stud too.
Abuka, I think is how
There
you
you
say
go,
his name.
Yep.
So I finally got that right. I'm not going to lie to you. I couldn't pronounce the defensive end's name, but I could pronounce that kid's name. So, yeah, that to me, they've got one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country.
I put him up there. Yep.
You look at the tight end, Cade Stover. He put up a respectable season last year. He might be one of the best, outside of a couple people, he might be one of the best tight ends in the country this year, too. The biggest question mark, and you touched on it, is who's going to play quarterback for him. I think either one of these kids, they were 4-star athletes. If one thing Georgia proved for the last 2 years, if you've got a really talented roster around you, it doesn't matter what your stars say, it just matters how you produce. Really and truly. So, with that being said, and I think Ohio State is one of the more talented rosters in all of college football. Dude, I think the worst case scenario here is they finish second in the division.
Okay.
I don't think there's any way.
Okay.
I don't think there's any way that they lose to both Michigan and Penn State. Hell, they might just beat Michigan this year and snap a 2-game skid against the Wolverines, right? And to get back to being the best team in the Big Ten. Because for all the reasons I just mentioned, can you make the same argument that Penn State is as deep as what I just said?
No, I can't. But here's the thing, and I'm like I said, I wanted to, dig deep into this, dude, and maybe it's because I'm not an Ohio State truther, like I know you are deep down. No, you're not wrong. Ohio State could win the Big Ten. It absolutely. I'd be fucking retarded to come on here and say that they couldn't. I just think this year, man, it's Penn State's year. I do. I actually, the more and more I read, the more and more I do some digging deep into this, and like I said, my opinion, your opinion really don't mean shit in the landscape of stuff. But this was an interesting hot take. This is why we like doing this. Why we like having these arguments. I think there's a 50% shot that they do finish third or worse, and I don't think worse. I think they finish right behind Penn State and Michigan. Yeah, you're right though. You want to point it out there, roster for roster on paper. Yeah, Ohio State probably roster for roster is probably top 3 or 4 in the country. I mean, with the talent they have, and you want to add up stars and go down that road, absolutely. But the big thing to me is the quarterback position, and I think that's where they're going to probably have to rely, Christian, on those running backs a little bit more than we've seen in years past. I think people dismiss how C.J. Stroud how good that guy really was, and that's kind of where I'm at. I think he won them some games, put them in a position to beat you guys last year in the playoff game. That was a lot of C.J. Stroud, man. He did it with his legs, which I think surprised a lot of people last year. I know C.J. Stroud can throw the ball. There's a reason why he was the 3rd pick in the draft or whatever. I mean, I get it, man. I think he's going to have a lot of success. I actually think he'll be pretty good with the Texans. But overall, I think Penn State has a chance to kind of disrupt this. And I'm really leaning towards putting Penn State on doing it this year, and I might look like a fool, but I'll come on here and admit it. Unlike you'll hide behind that Georgia banner like you do every week, and here we are. No, good take though, Christian. Overall, man, I don't have much to add to it. I like your take. Like I said, I think it could be either or here, man. I really truly do.
Yeah, Chris, I think you said it best there. It'll be interesting to watch as we kind of get through the season here, and hell, we could both be wrong, right? This
is what makes it fun, though, right? I mean, this is what makes it fun.
No, you're absolutely right. Well, guys, I think with that being said, we're gonna catch you guys next Wednesday and Friday around 7-ish on the show. Yep. Chris, what are your closing thoughts on this episode?
My big thing, if you guys watch this, man, I appreciate. Please comment in the sections, dude. Comment. Tell me who answer some of our questions. It's not just between me and Christian when we do this show. This is the reason why we're kind of doing the show. We want to hear everybody else's thoughts. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm a fucking inbred from Nebraska and I don't know anything about Ohio State football this year. Tell Christian that he needs to get out of that basement that he lives in underneath his mom and get out and watch some other teams play other than Georgia every year. No, I truly appreciate the sport, guys. Thank you very much. Chris, you got anything to add before we get out of here?
Nah, brother, I think that should do it. Again, guys, we'll see y'all on